Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Mindgasms podcast. Going to talk to, hopefully, correct me if I get your name wrong here, because I've talked to you many times before, but I've never said your name out loud. Is it Sheezan Alamgir?
Yeah, that's my birth name. You can call me Scazio if that makes you.
Scazio? Okay.
Yeah,
You want me to change that in the title after this is done too?
sure.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's easier for me to pronounce. But yeah, so I know that you've been a fan of mine for a long time, and I really appreciate that. And we get into some interesting conversations on the mixed mental arts, and probably also the unstructured Facebook group. And yeah, you were just actually just talking about how we got onto this topic that we're going to discuss. So you want to just say what you were just starting to say before I said wait until we start the stream?
Oh yeah, this initially like I'm no expert in when coming talking about time or I don't understand much about physics beyond classical mechanics.
Yeah, me
Uh,
neither. Me neither.
so what I'm saying should be taken with a grain of salt. And so this conversation initially started when you made a post in Mixed Mental Art saying if time is a illusion, if time is a what is a concept, is a man-made concept, then time travel should not be possible, right, or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was something like that. It was if time is an illusion, a concept created by humans, is time travel impossible? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so I have a very different view on this. So I was getting expressing my point of view on the matter
Mm-hmm.
in the thread, but it got very long and arduous, and I felt like it would be better in a voice conversation. And so you suggested, why don't we make a podcast out of it? So that's why I'm here.
Yeah,
Um,
cool. Well, I appreciate you talking to me, man. I know we've talked many times before, but we've never actually done a podcast. So this was, uh, I'm sure hopefully we'll do more than this too. But yeah, let's get into um, like I guess to start this off. Um, I thought I think I mentioned this when we were discussing it in the thread, but I was just sort of speculating really. I wouldn't say that I totally 100% believe that time is an illusion. I just kind of like that idea because it's fun to think about. And so like if it is, because I've heard interesting theories about people talking about how, this concept, especially this concept of time being a totally forward motion thing. Like there's a past, a present, and a future. That's the word linear. That time is linear, and that I've heard physicists or people with knowledge of physics talk about how this concept of linear time is a concept invented by physics or by physicists rather. But I've also heard other people, of course, talk about what time is from a science perspective and from physicist perspectives too. But I think it's interesting to think about what time is, and then we also talked about time travel too. So maybe first we should talk about like I guess I should say, like I said, I really don't know what time is. I really am not sure whether whether it's just a social construct or whether it really exists, or maybe it really exists and it's different from the way I think about it, or different from the way humans in general think about it. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Like, how would you define time?
So time, I think you said it was created by physics. I would say time, like people were trying to measure time like long before they were trying to figure out physics or anything. Like how when the crops would come, or what time, like at what point like the animals show up so they can hunt. I think they've been trying to measure it for, and there's been I think I've seen documentaries where they made pillars from and used sunlight to get a grasp of the idea of time, right? So it's been around for a while. But in modern in Newtonian physics, it's kind of like a straight motion, kind of like a beat going on, like a metronome. And so you wouldn't like how would you so they use how would you measure speed without that concept, you know? Like what is speed or what is acceleration like how is something in motion if there is no concept of time like so so I think it's a made up concept obviously, but I mean it's not obvious, but I think it might be a made up concept. And Einstein has a different take on it too, I think. It's in where it's linked with space and expansion and stuff like that. I don't want to get too into that because I don't know much about it. So my initial thing was, so if you imagine a graph with time as an axis and you're trying to do math, um, you're using it as a graph. Anything traveling in that graph is kind of traveling time, right? So if time is kind of a moving thing, and we're sitting here having a conversation, we're sort of traveling time as well, sort right? And
Okay.
we're since time is moving and we're moving along with it, we are traveling time. So I thought even if it's a made up concept, you could so that was my disagreement that even if it's a made up concept, one can argue that even just being alive and present, you're traveling time. But I
Okay.
guess you what you meant was like, can we travel back and forth in time or
Yeah,
something?
like the idea that we see in movies, like Back to the Future, or when you're traveling forward in time, like by decades or hundreds of years.
Yeah, I always found it interesting, like in Avengers or Dragon Ball Z or something like that, where they travel back to like an almost alternate reality. I found it interesting. Like, does the machine create its own universe? Like when they like step through it, it's like another the universe at a different state, and they just create a copy of it because they seem to be like exist the present and the past and the future seem to be existing at the same time, right? In those kind of art, uh, which I think which I find fascinating because the way I see it, there's no way. The way I see it, the reality already changed to its current state, and unless we know how to recreate the whole universe at a different state, we can't travel to travel time. Um,
Okay. So
do you see how
I,
what I
th-
mean?
I think I see what you mean. So like we couldn't we couldn't travel time by those distances of time, let's say, unless we were capable of duplicating those circumstances, which would include that when we travel through time, when we arrive at the point wherever we are, that it would create like some sort of it would create a new parallel universe existing, that creates a new past and future as well. I think I've heard of this idea before because, like, when you're traveling through time, you would create that entire new sequence of events because you traveling that way alters what has already happened in the past, and it alters what is going to happen in the future as well. Is that the idea?
Um, That's no, the version I'm talking about is, say, I know you've watched Dragon Ball Z, right?
Yeah,
Or seen the Avengers movies or something like that.
yeah,
So in those worlds, so in, for example, in Dragon Ball Z, the alternate reality of Trunks is completely different from the one Goku and the others are, the one we are following is in, right?
yeah.
It's so it's almost like they have a parallel universe over there, and
Right.
its future and present is not tied to this one that's
Hmm.
happening. And it's almost like he's traveling dimensions and not really traveling back in time to
Okay.
say. So he's not reversing the universe to a previous state. He's more like traveling to an alternate universe, right?
Right.
So a
Right.
lot of Hollywood movies and shows, like most, I think this is the most popular version. This is the most popular version of time travel that most people subscribe to is this one, right? Where they're not altering this reality. They're kind of going to a different, because it's assumed that the present is happening when they're gone, right? They're just
Hmm.
at a different. So to be there, there'd have to be an alternate universe, right? An alternate reality almost.
Okay. So, and you're saying that's the type of time travel that is assumed to be the one that's happening that we often see in movies and TV shows?
Yeah, and which I think is very unlikely because um so if the Terminator actually traveled to an alternate reality and changed things over there, why would it change over here? Cuz I don't see why in his, like, in his version, why are they linked? They always make that link, but but since they don't like reverse the whole universe in a way, like everything around them, and keeping them in sort of a bubble where they're just isolated somehow from this change happening, and they're traveling back and then changing something and then traveling forward again. So unless they're doing that, I don't see how, traveling to a different reality and altering it would have any effect on uh the reality they spawned in.
Okay. So So are you saying then that the common type of time travel that we see in movies and TV shows, like what happens in the Terminator, for example, it might be less realistic because it's assumed that when you travel back and forward in time, or at least this is the version that I see in some movies where you have to be like the Back to the Future movies again, for example. You have to be really careful to not alter things in the past or the future because they could have such enormous effects on the present if you change even one small thing. That I think they call it the butterfly effect, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and it makes
Okay.
sense if we could travel back in time, like in our reality, like rewind the version we're in and alter something in the past, it it probably would have a very different effect, right? It would have a, I think that's very plausible. But yeah, like I was saying, if you're like traveling to an alternate timeline and not reversing the one you're in, then affecting the alternate timeline shouldn't even matter.
Okay. Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. Hmm.
So unless you subscribe to that version where time traveling is going to a almost a different copy, right? Different copy of the current reality. Unless you subscribe to that, sorry, if you subscribe to that version of it, you're not really traveling time. You're just going to an alternate reality, not really
Like
traveling time.
right, like you're traveling between different dimensions instead of traveling through time.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So then, so does that by that logic me then does that mean that um that the way that you understand time, or the way that you think that time can be understood scientifically, is that we're always existing in time, just in our daily functions in the real world, and so that when you time travel, it's actually more like traveling between different dimensions. So by that logic, would you say that time is sort of its own dimension, like almost a law of physics, and that's why it couldn't be an illusion, which would mean that time travel is more possible? Or it sounded like you might have also been saying that time travel is more possible because it's traveling through different dimensions rather than through time. I'm might be a little confused there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not the best at um so
That was a
I
really complex question I just
that
asked
that
you.
that
Yeah.
was I was so can you sorry, can you clarify it again? So if I'm sorry, I know this must be annoying, but
No, no, no. So, well, I'm having trouble thinking about these questions as I'm asking them too. But so, yeah, let's go with the first one first. So, would you say that, based on the way you've been describing it, that the way time can be understood scientifically is that it's sort of its own dimension, almost like a law of physics, or like gravity, or something like that?
yeah, if you take the popular Hollywood or like the popular fantasy traveling of time, then time has to be real because you're just making copies, right? As you're traveling time, you're making copies. So I don't know. It's like a concept. No matter how you describe it, seems like it's a concept. Um, it's not a physical object or a force in the world that we can actually measure. It's something that we create to explain the world around us, right?
Right. Yeah, I think we definitely I think we definitely agree about that part. I just think, well, like I said, I just find this to be a fascinating subject, and I like to speculate and think about it from a lot of different angles. Like, so if we hmm like, does that by that definition then, does that mean that time travel is more possible than it would be if time travel were actually the narrative that we sometimes see that we were talking about, which means that you're actually altering the past and the future when you travel, so that you have to be more careful of stuff? Like, is that is the way that you described it working now, like it time being almost like almost like a concept that we apply to something? Does that mean that time travel is more realistic or more achievable than it would be if we defined it as the like actually traveling to the past and the future, and that you have to be careful of not altering it?
I think the one where you have to be careful about not altering it, uh, that version of time would make time more real, actually, to me.
The first one or the second one? The one that you're describing or the other one?
You're describing the one where if you travel back in time and change something, it would have a effect once
Yeah.
you travel back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in that version, time is more real. The
Okay.
version I described, their time is kind of like an illusion. You're just traveling to an alternate dimension, right?
Okay.
So in the one you're describing, time is more real because you're actually somehow rewinding reality rather than traveling to an alternate reality.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So that's interesting too, because in the original hypothetical question that I posed about this, it was, if time is an illusion, then is time travel possible? And it sounds like your description, it kind of depends on how you define it, because in a way it's almost like you're saying time is an illusion. So what we mean by time travel is actually traveling between different dimensions. But then it depends, like I said, it depends, because if that's how you define time, then time is real, but time travel is possible, but it's just different from what some people, but what might be the conventional understanding of what time and what time travel are.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. But if you were going by like pure like logical statements, time if like you would do math, if time is not real, then time travel would not be real in that sense. But obviously, we're not talking about that, are we? Or
Well, I think I'm kind of trying to talk about both, which is why it might be confusing. I'm kind of just speculating from different angles.
yeah, that's why I didn't want to have this conversation in the comment section because it felt like it's such a grindy. It would take so much. It would not be productive. Like right now, um, in like what 20 minutes, I think we have come closer to what our positions on this is than what that thread was doing, where we were just going back and forth. I don't know. That was strange.
Yeah,
And it was hard to explain because it is a hard to explain thing, isn't it? Uh,
yeah, it is. It's a really complex subject for sure.
yeah, and we shouldn't feel bad about it. I think even people like Sean Carroll or all the big scientists also probably have trouble understanding this. I
Yeah,
think.
like even physicists who study the physics of time, supposedly, right?
Yeah.
Someone said in the live chat here a few things that we could discuss that I think are interesting. Someone said time is accelerated by gravity, and also that we have a multiverse. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that? Because I've heard about that before, about how time has some sort of interaction with gravity, but I really don't understand it that well. But I've heard theories about a multiverse before too. I've heard like Neil deGrasse Tyson and other physicists talk about that.
Yeah. I don't know if Neil deGrasse Tyson subscribes to that version of it. He tends to be more on the classical physics side of things when talking about things. People like Lawrence Krauss or Sean Carroll, they would go like really psychedelic into the quantum physics stuff, which are pretty hard to grapple. But yeah, the version of time where we were in Dragon Ball Z or the Marvel universe, that it, in that version of time, the multiverse would have to exist, right?
Yeah, wait, say that again.
S- in Dragon Ball Z, the multiverse in Dragon Ball Z or
Oh
like
yeah,
Avengers type worlds, the multiverse would have to be real, right? Like in time
yeah,
traveling, the concept of time travel in those works of art are kind of like traveling the multiverse.
yeah, 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 for
And
sure.
and people say the people who believe in the multiverse say there's like infinite possible versions of the universe, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So it's not that crazy to think, yeah, you could just jump to an alternate universe where time it's exactly like your universe, but since it's in the past. So it would be, I don't know what gravity has to do with it all though, but
Yeah, I don't know either. Um, I just thought of an interesting question related to that too. So if time travel is really just traveling to an alternate universe, then could you travel to a different time within that universe? Like, could you travel to the past or the future within that universe if that were possible? Or how would you even like? Would you have a concept of that? I'm not really sure.
I mean, if there's infinite possible ways things are in a and an infinite number of universe, like by definition, if there are infinite possibilities and infinite universes, there's bound to be one way, like one where you could travel to where it's just your universe, but just at a different time. It's exactly our world, say in the 1930s, or I don't know. I mean, that seems plausible given the axioms.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Yeah, that's another like the multiverse. That's another interesting concept to think about, and we see a lot of movies and TV shows that have to do with that too. Like the one that I was just thinking of that they get into all the time is Rick and Morty. They travel to different parallel universes all the time in that show. And yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's interesting to think about like if there actually are infinite parallel universes, if there actually are infinite versions of you that have lived out literally every single different possibility that you could have lived your life that could lead to literally every possible result that you could think of. That's always really interesting to think about.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Butterfly Effect?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, that was one of the first like fucked up and weird movies that I saw. I remember I loved that, especially the first time I watched it.
Yeah, in that movie he was traveling time in this sense, right? He was traveling to different alternate universes where he made different choices, and the result was completely different based on those choices, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was a really interesting movie. And yeah, like it's almost like the ending of that movie. At the end he realized that you have to stop changing things, you have to just accept things the way they are, because the more you try to change them, the more fucked up they get.
Yeah,
That
because you can't account for all the different things, like changing one thing, like how it affects everything else.
mhm.
You can't account for it, so
It's almost like it seems like there's almost that theme in the Terminator movies too. Like in the first Terminator movie, the Arnold comes back to try to kill Sarah Connor, and she thought it was all over when she killed the Terminator. But then Skynet just sent another Terminator, and then at the end of the second one, they thought it was all over. But it's like you can't kill Skynet no matter how many different times you try to defeat it. And then at the end of the third one, the apocalypse just happens anyway, and then like, and then I don't know. I kind of stopped following the timeline after the fourth
yeah,
one
I,
with
I I only saw
Christian
three
Bale.
of them, and I
Yeah,
don't clearly remember
yeah.
everything.
You could stop after the third one. Really, I kind of like the Terminator Salvation one with Christian Bale, just because it's more of a, I don't know the way you define it with the timeline. It's sort of like a prequel, even though it takes place in the future. Um, and then there's the one after that, Terminator Genesis. I thought that one was kind of awful, and I haven't seen the new one, but I like the first three. I think those ones are really good.
Yeah, I don't know what happens in the Christian Bale one, but I thought the second one. I think the second one is my favorite. The one
Yeah,
I used to.
that's my favorite too. That's like sometimes when I feel like rewatching Terminator movies, instead of just rewatching the whole series, I just rewatch that one and maybe the third one because the second one's my favorite too. Yeah.
The third one, I like the concept of the villain, where the villain was some kind of cross between the second one and the Terminator, right? He kind of had like a cyborg thing going on, and then like a Mercury like surface thing going. I thought that was interesting. I'm
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
a robot geek where I like fictions like Transformers and Terminators and designs of robots. I think it's funny.
yeah,
Watch Robot Wars. I don't know if you've seen Robot Wars ever, like people compete in tournaments.
yeah. I think I
What?
have.
Yeah,
I
pretty. They can be entertaining. Sometimes as entertaining as MMA, even.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. I haven't seen any recently, but I definitely have seen some of those before.
Especially
Yeah.
because MMA, you have people have boiled it down to like very a niche state, right? Like where you kind of have to know these types of martial arts to be the best, and you have to fight in this narrow way to be competitive with the best in the world, right?
Hmm.
But in like Robot Wars, you see people coming up with all sorts of wacky, wacky designs of robots, and it's always funny. It's always you see a lot of unexpected stuff when the robots are fighting.
Like what?
Like some would use like a hammer thing. Some would try to use pivot more, like more kind of a pivot force to like throw them out of the arena, or like smaller size to just kind of dodge around. It's kind of like cartoons and fantasy stuff where all sorts of wacky fighting styles can work, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, this makes me think about another sort of related topic that would be fun to talk about, which is AI, which I was just thinking about that. I don't know why, but I was just thinking about that movie. I don't know if you've seen it. That one called Ex Machina. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, yeah.
Where that guy is building an AI, and then that guy who comes there to basically be the human component in the Turing test, he falls in love with her, and then he lets her out, and then he just leaves. She kills her creator, and then she leaves him there to die. That's one of my favorite movies about AI. I don't how do you what do you think of that movie?
Oh, as a movie was great, but I don't know if it. Yeah, as a movie was awesome. I loved the movie, the story and everything. But I don't know if it makes people paranoid about AI too much, because I feel like AI research is so far behind what you see in that movie.
Oh yeah, probably.
And like coders' ability to code algorithms that could even understand human emotion or even manipulate is so limited.
Yeah.
I don't know. In real
Yeah,
life, I feel like it's very limited.
yeah,
And
that's what I've heard too, like from people I know who are coders and or engineers. That's basically what the sort of thing that they've told me. Like we're nowhere close to being able to develop that type of technology. Like you'd have to develop entirely new ways of developing that technology.
yeah, um, but yeah, even smart people like Elon Musk seem to be a bit paranoid about it,
Yeah,
which makes me skeptical sometimes. Like,
yeah,
what is it? Can it actually Can that
yeah,
actually happen? But I think it's more believable where he says you design a robot to do a specific thing, like manage the stock market or something like that, but it doesn't know all the other variables linked to it. So it's just hyper focused on improving the economy, getting the stock market up. And it makes all sorts of fucked up things happen, like planes crash and uh, k- other things happen to reach that his objective, which it was designed to. I could see that as more plausible than like a ex machina type. like a five-head robot that can like see your manipulate your emotions, understands your psychology, and like total and it's like a evil genius that's like totally, you know.
Yeah,
I find that version of this a tool designed for a specific thing, but maybe would have in that world it would have to have access to a lot of outer things, right? To create
yeah,
that kind of chaos. So I wonder if how it would get that kind of access, or in
yeah,
its quest to improve the market, would it also try to get access to everything else?
yeah. Maybe it
Uh,
would, and like maybe humans would give it that access because they think, oh well, it can learn more efficiently this way and become more efficient.
yeah, that'd
Yeah.
be scary.
I like it's well, it's interesting the Elon Musk's proposed solution to his his like his paranoia about AI, that like basically making humans cyborgs. I think it's called Neuralink, that thing that he's doing, where try the thing, I think it's something to do with putting a chip in your brain.
He's
I wonder about
somehow
that.
trying to connect computers with the human mind or something
Yeah.
like that, right?
Yeah, I don't. I think a lot about that because I mean, there are obviously tons of people who understand these subjects way better than me. But I like just from a perspective of having little to no knowledge about it, I think that part of me thinks that would be a great idea, because if the human mind is connected to the computer or the AI technology, then you would be able to control it. But then on the other hand, the pessimistic perspective would be that if you're if you're in that cyborg mode and your mind is connected to that AI, maybe it would be easier, maybe it would make it easier for the AI to manipulate you, and maybe it would be even worse. I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Sorry, I kind of zoned out. Sorry, what was it you said? Sorry, I'm a little
So,
high too.
oh, I am too.
Yeah.
The perfect subject to get high for. But
Yeah, it is.
yeah. so so I was basically I was asking if you're if like if you have a chip in your brain and you're a cyborg, would that be better because it would make it easier to have more control over the AI if you're connected to if your mind is connected to it, or would it make it worse because your mind being connected to the AI would also make it easier for it to manipulate you?
Yeah, that's a risky thing. Like how much control that chip has over your functions, right?
Yeah,
Um, and how much control you have over its function. Like if I would guess the best way to design it would be you have complete control over its function and it having little to no access to your functions, right?
yeah,
That would be the safer way of doing it. But yeah, if you're talking about a robot that's a stock market robot that can do stuff like that, I wonder if it could figure out ways to, because they do learn really fast.
yeah.
They're constantly practicing. Like, have you ever seen the Google robot that plays video games like Dota or like Go, the Google DeepMind?
I don't think I've seen it, but I've heard about, of course, like AIs beating human players in chess and in Go, but I haven't seen them playing video games. No.
Yeah, they kind of constantly keep playing against each other. 1,000 times. Like as we're speaking, they could be practicing something, a lot more times than us and reiterating it. So they kind of learn fast, and it's hard to comprehend as a human. Like even if you didn't give it the power to get access to your mind, it's a dicey thing where it might actually figure out some way. Because we kind of think like, wait, the robot is robot as a human, and it's far from that kind of ability. So So it'd be hard for it, but robots can learn stuff real fast and can get out of hand. That's something Elon Musk also argued, like the kind of snowballs.
Yeah, yeah. This it's really it's interesting to think about for
But he
sure.
did give his robots, sorry, his self-driving cars AI. So
Yeah.
I kind of wonder how serious he is about when he talks about AI. He feels looks like he feels safe letting them drive in the roads. So
Hmm. Yeah, that's
uh,
interesting. I actually hadn't thought of that before, but that's a really good point. Like he's really worried about AI, but he's totally fine with AIs controlling cars. Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, I think yeah, I think that in the last interview I watched with him, I believe he was asked that question, and I think his answer was something like something similar to what you were just saying a few minutes ago about how there can be AIs attached to more narrow functions like manipulating the stock market. I think his answer was something like that. It's okay to do something like that because you're assigning an AI to a more narrow function. Like we wouldn't want an AI to have control over the nuclear warheads or bigger issues like that. But I mean, then again, even like you were saying with the stock market, they could just make planes crash if it could manipulate the stock market that way too. But I wonder,
I
like,
mean that's an argument Elon Musk made. I wouldn't understand how it would go from that to that, but that's an argument he made. So I'm assuming
okay,
he gave some thought to it, and there's probably plausible ways that something like that could happen. Maybe, I don't know.
yeah. I mean, maybe like if they're I don't know, like maybe you would have to keep whatever gives the downloads or the updates to the AI. Maybe you would have to try to keep those on their own separate networks or something like I don't know, this is just me speculating again, but if you were if all of the self-driven Teslas, if they were all connected, if they all got their software updates from the same network, then would it be plausible that if that were the case, that the even a computer with I mean not a, even a human with malicious intentions, or if an AI develops that capability, could they do some terrible things with all of the self-driven cars? Like, could they just crash all of them into buildings because they get to the Terminator point where they decide, well, humans are a threat to yourself, so we have to destroy all humans?
Yeah, I wonder if AI is designed like a biological organism and it cares about its survival and stuff like that. I would totally rely on that, right? If they cared about their because I wonder if machines could really care about surviving or give a shit about reproducing themselves and surviving or the way we do or
Yeah,
animals do. Because we kind of assume that's a trait they would have too, right?
yeah,
When we're
and
thinking about that.
even in I don't know if you've heard of this, but apparently there are DARPA like robots, basically like DARPA robot dogs and other type of robots that they're supposedly training to be fighting in wars. And then there are also obviously already drones, right? But especially in something much more anthropomorphized, or something that we identify as like being able to connect with psychologically more, like a dog, or if you engineered like actual AI robots to go and fight in wars, maybe you would presumably try to engineer self-preservation into them, because if they're fighting wars, you want
Yeah, it would
them.
make sense.
Yeah, and like maybe that could take over if they're like some sort of learning AI, right?
Yeah, those are the most dangerous types, right? War robots
Yeah,
with artificial intelligence, and they're somehow programmed to not take losses, be efficient about that. That could get out of hand. Yeah, I can see that. It's very Yeah, that's totally like a Terminator scenario, like
Yeah, yeah,
Skynet
exactly.
scenario, where he kind of assumes that wait, our creator himself is like a threat to us, our survival, and so kind of function that way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We've talked about like Skynet scenarios, but we haven't talked about like the other opposite, like uber positive end of the spectrum, like the singularity. Like obviously, with all of these examples we've gone through, they could go the complete opposite direction, and the ability of AIs to learn could make things like unimaginably better for humans too. Like we've of course seen those scenarios in science fiction movies and TV shows too. That's why like especially someone like me who is very who is like no understanding of how it actually works. It's really interesting to speculate about these like in from both different directions.
yeah, I lean more towards the positive side of it, AI, than the doom. The doom things are obviously the most fun when you're talking with people or like watching movies and stuff like that. But I think in actual reality, I think that this technology is probably gonna help us a lot more than it's gonna hurt us in the long run. It's it definitely has the potential to solve a lot of problems we find hard to solve at the moment.
Yeah,
And yeah, and it's very resource efficient too. Like putting together a group of humans and like paying them for decades to work on a research. Uh, when you add like AIs that are also working alongside them, like it becomes exponentially faster. And
yeah. Yeah, like
yeah,
I think one possibility that I was talking about with yeah with Ladan Jiracek when he was on my podcast before, he's traveled all over the world, and he works on neural implants. He's developing technology for putting neural implants into people. He was talking about how the possibility that if we develop AIs that are so powerful that they can just do all of those societal functions like you were talking about, then maybe humans wouldn't even have to have jobs anymore, and we could just spend our lives pursuing creativity and enjoying life. And if you wanted to, you could do some sort of creative pursuit. Like I would probably still write and make YouTube videos, for example. And then if people wanted to, they could pay you for those from the money they would get from their own creative pursuits. And then maybe if you wanted a custom built, really expensive wooden table instead of the just generic one that you get given for free from a factory, maybe you could use it for that. That's an interesting sort of possibility to think about too.
yeah, and like even engineering would become like how people see art, right? Like engineers might become obsolete, but people might prefer, oh, I like a human engineered
Hmm.
car, like a, I like riding human engineered cars, and I spend like 5 times as much buying those than the far superior car that the AI has invented.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
Like just
so I
want to
don't
be.
think, yeah, like all sorts of professions would be viable. Like um, yeah, we would get. I could see that being good. I don't think humans would ever be like totally not engaged with a society and like trying to build it and trying to optimize it. I think there would always be some kind of effort going in that kind of thing. But AI would probably take a lot of, make a lot of us just freer and
Yeah,
able to just, like, even robots, like a lot of the manual labors and stuff like can be taken care of. We just don't know how to we just don't know economic systems that would make it work for everyone, right? um
yeah,
we could automate a lot of work, and obviously there's like a cost thing to. I'm sure if business people had the option, they would probably do it. There's a cost to benefit thing, that threshold that hasn't been met yet, probably.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, once that's been met, yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about the future. I wonder what people would think about UBI and stuff like that in that kind of world. Like,
Yeah,
would people,
exactly.
would Republicans be like, wait, no, you gotta work hard and you gotta put your effort in? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't know. That's
When
feels.
there are no more jobs left anymore.
Yeah. If there's not a job left for me to do, I might as well be hedonistic. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the cost benefit analysis that people make, that put them into their tribal camps about UBI too, right? Like if you just give everyone money, then probably some of those people are just going to like fuck off and get baked and play video games all day. But
Yeah,
then
that's totally me. If
yeah,
that's me, dude, it's me.
exactly.
Yeah.
But then some people are still going to want to do more stuff than that anyway. And I don't know. I haven't, like, I've heard about studies on this, but I haven't looked at them myself. But I think I've heard about studies saying that that it usually, yeah, I'm pretty sure I heard that the people who gain the most benefit, or no, for the most part, the people who work less are teenagers, which to a certain extent isn't surprising, and then also like single mothers and retired people, or people who are still working even though they should be retired because they can't forward to retired. So at least according to that, obviously this isn't objective knowledge, but at least according to that, it sounds like it would work out for those reasons. But I'm pretty sure that only small pilot studies of this have been done too. Like there was actually one done in Canada, in Ontario. I think they ended it last year, and it was only like a year or so long at the most. It got defunded by the government, but it seemed to be working well for that short period of time. But I don't know. And I mean, it depends on so many different factors, and like especially in terms of how you implement it, of course, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think humans do need some kind of purpose. Like, not people would fuck off and play video games a lot more, but I think it wouldn't stop. Like, at the end of the day, everyone needs like a purpose, or like something they're doing for the more than aside from themselves only. And maybe the productivity would go down, but I don't think it would stop. Like, people would still be trying, and there would be motivated people working on it. And I don't know, I guess it would depend on the UBI. If it's like a bare minimum, like a survival state that just manages a survival state, then it would, I don't think it would affect productivity, because people would want to live better and stuff like that anyways. So it would just take care of like the burden of, stressing about it. You've seen studies where like stress and like stressing about your rent and all, just worrying about all that stuff actually doesn't make you function as well in life,
Hmm.
and halts your progress. So it would get rid of a lot of those things and maybe maybe let us access the full potential of humans a lot more better.
Hmm. Yeah, if it were $1,000 a month, like what Andrew Yang is proposing, for example, I can see that mostly just being used to help people pay their bills a little more easily and perform other basic functions. Like if I were getting a UBI of $1,000 a month right now, I would basically be able to easily make more money while doing the things that I enjoy that pay little to no money, like tutoring that I don't get paid very much for, or like all my creative pursuits that I basically don't get paid for. And then I would probably use that money to pay for continuing my education And I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure a lot of people would use it to help pay their bills, like especially people living in extreme poverty. If they got an extra $1,000 a month, maybe they could, like they could get enough groceries and pay all their bills and not have to work 80 hours a week, perhaps. But then, obviously, on the other side of the spectrum, one problem that people point out is that if you're giving it to literally everyone, then literally someone like Jeff Bezos would get an extra $1,000 a month too.
I don't see that as a problem. Bezos getting, like, if you're gonna make something universal, you might as well, to be fair, give it to even the people who don't need it, right? Um, I don't think it's immoral. Like some people argue, oh, you're gonna make colleges free, so what? Trump's daughter is gonna go to college for free. You want that? I could care less if they go to college free. I mean, college could be like a human right. Educate, getting access to good education, stuff like that. I think ideally should be a human right, and I don't see what's wrong with like a billionaire's kid getting that right. Like, it doesn't really trigger. Like, I don't get those kind of arguments, you know. Um, yeah.
I think I mean, I kind of agree with you there too. I think the idea is that it's just a waste where you could spend it better. Like I've heard other people propose that it should be not necessarily a universal basic income, but an income only for people below a certain income level. But then there, with that idea, the problem becomes what is the income level below which you should get it, and should it stay that way? Because presumably, since the economy continuously changes, you might realistically want to change that minimum poverty level, which might be really difficult, especially if you're trying to implement giving that amount of money to so many different people. So maybe it would be way easier to just do it universally.
Yeah, universal is probably easier, but not the most efficient way to distribute that. And another thing I worry about is like, because economics is mostly about demand and supply, right? So more people having money, wouldn't that make like capitalists just raise prices on products? And you would have to have a lot more regulations, perhaps. Because they would try to get price your rent up because they know you have an extra $1,000. To
Yeah.
get your rent up, or maybe like a really basic necessity product, maybe raise the price of toilet paper. I don't know.
Or maybe even companies would decrease wages too because they think, well, you're getting an extra $1,000 a month. Why do you need to be paid this much?
Yeah. Those, yeah, for sure, dude. But I think minimum wage, I think it's kind of like a, if a person gives their full effort and time for an hour, they kind of deserve that kind of monies. So I don't think that is already regulated, right? So
Yeah.
at least in United States and Canada. So I don't think that's a problem. But yeah, I worry about, other more variable things that are not regulated, like I was saying, like basic goods that people make, and like rent or something. Although I guess a lot of places have rent control nowadays too. Um, I don't know, but I think it could inflate prices of things and just add to the inequality, and not really. Capitalists would figure out a way to maximize on the UBI thing. Obviously, I could
Yeah.
I could see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, from an economic perspective, people kind of look at it from different opposing political lenses, right? Like how they do with minimum wage and rent control, which you just mentioned. Like for all of those, including UBI, I've heard people
Yeah.
I've heard like economists who are more conservative leaning, basically be more against UBI and more against raising the minimum wage and against rent control, and then more left-leaning economists tend to be the opposite, pro UBI, pro rent control, pro raising minimum wage, and then I guess mm, I don't know, like they're from more of a libertarian perspective, perhaps they would probably be similar to the conservatives in terms of rent control and minimum wage. But I guess that there definitely are some libertarian perspectives on that are favorable to UBI too.
I'm guessing their arguments would be, for competition's sake, they wouldn't raise it. They would try to, for they're competing against their with their products, right? So they would try to keep the prices as low as possible so they can get share of the market. But the problem is when someone has a monopoly on a product or close to a monopoly on a product, then they could definitely take advantage of it.
Yeah,
um I can get the libertarian or the right wing idea that, yeah, like people are competing, so they wouldn't just exploit people just for the lulz and
yeah,
lose market share. you know
yeah,
um because they want to keep their customers. They don't want to, they obviously want to keep their customers happy.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Hey man, it's been interesting talking to you.
Yeah,
uh
thanks, man. Yeah, this is really fun.
uh I don't know how much we have clarified the time thing, but it was definitely fun talking about it.
Yeah, that's
And
the whole point, man. As long as we have fun, that's what's important. Yeah.
all right,
All right.
so
You want to end it there then for now?
yeah, let's end it there for end it there. Now I
All
got a
right.
couple of things to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm glad we talked about some other interesting topics too, the multiverse, AI, and UBI. It's always
yeah.
good to talk about lots of different subjects. But yeah, let's do another episode sometime, man, or maybe you could join one of the ensembles that I do sometime too. We'll figure something out.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I'm not a like a philosophical or like a knowledge heavyweight where I kind of get that imposter syndrome in the MMA group where there's a lot of really literate people, like really people who have read a lot of books about the matter and thought about it a lot more than me. Um so yeah, when you're talking with Chief Keef, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like very knowledgeable about philosophy, and I don't know how much I could contribute to something like that, but you know, I would definitely love to yeah, participate in anything you think I could in future,
Yeah.
for
Yeah, I
sure.
mean like there are lots of more like more casual chats like the last one I did with uh with Polish Christian Bale and Shane Kennedy where we were talking about like Brett Weinstein and culture and evolution and social justice and all of those sorts of things. Or I'm sure you could join the some of the movie chats that I started doing with
Oh yeah, I saw your
Becky and
Matrix
Christine.
series. I'm a huge Matrix fanboy myself.
Oh,
Uh,
awesome.
I
Yeah.
watch it, so I've watched it so many
Oh
times.
yeah, I nerd out like a motherfucker on those movies.
Yeah,
Yeah. I like to talk about the multiple deep layers of philosophical and spiritual complexity. Like The Matrix
yeah,
is basically my religion.
yeah. Dude, that movie is quite the it's quite the I don't know. Okay, we could talk about it maybe some other time, but
Yeah,
yeah, I
for sure,
it's
man.
really easy talking to you. I thought it was fun, dude. Time went by real fast.
All right. Thanks, man. Cool. All right. Looking forward to the next time. Well, I'll just say all the stuff I like to say at the end of my videos here, and then you can give any last words if you want to before you go. So, yeah, thanks to everyone for watching another episode of the Mindgasms podcast. Hope you found this as interesting as we did. And thanks to everyone who likes and shares this video, and to those of you who subscribe to my channel, and especially to those of you who give me money on Patreon, which I always really appreciate. And I'll put the link for my Patreon page in the description of this video, like I always do. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all. And also, think about time travel, multiverse, and AI. All right. So,
Uh,
any last words there, Scazio?
no, that's all. It's been fun. Yeah, follow Andrew. His stuff is pretty fun. Yeah, have a good time, guys.
All right. Thanks, man. Adios until next time, everyone.
Until next time.